Cool. Okay, building off yesterday, basically. So I don't expect you guys to follow along. Maybe better is to follow the lecture and then pay attention afterwards. This is going to be a super short one. So basically going to still do the same things we did the other day.
Make sure you share your screen again.
Oh, yeah, fuck, right. Thank you. Boom. You guys can see it?
Yep.
All right, cool. So open up my test folder like we've been doing in the command line, cd into the directory, dot, a new one, day 3. So I'll open up day 2 and quickly go over that again. And I gave you guys homework. I hope everyone figured out the homework. To go over it and reiterate, the division problem, you had to use the, not division, but the is even problem, you had to use the modulo operator, which will return a remainder, right? So something like this. So the solution to the is even thing was you can make a function called is even. And if it's divisible by 2 and has no remainder, that's what this means. Modulo returns the remainder of division. So if the number is divisible by 2 and equals and has no remainder, it equals 0. It's even. So that was the solution for the first one. And if that still doesn't make sense, you don't use those a ton, but it's a good idea. I was just kind of thinking something that could get you guys Googling and figure something out that was like 1 or 2 lines of code, but was still something else. And then to use that in a function, was like, you had the array, and then for let I equals 0, I is less than array.length, I plus plus. If is even, you log out the number. Else, I told you to log it out. The number was odd. So that's the solution for the homework. I want to be quick there because that's, most of you guys should have already done it already. But to reiterate what that does is we have a function that checked whether something's even or not. Some of you might have done it inline like this. But to make it more readable for me, I put that into and because, to get practice writing other functions, I just made that into its own little helper function. And then now I can call is even on the array value. Array I gets the value of the array, not the key of the array. So I saw most of you guys did that already, so I won't spend too much time on that. But those are your solutions, and I can post them in the chat after if people want that as well. So for day 3, we're basically going to do one more data type and then practicing everything we've learned still, which is going to be the pattern for the next couple of days. So if you're still confused by it, totally makes sense. We're still going to use it. So we have arrays and stuff. We know that. What if we want to model our next exercise on something real, like Discord posts? So I can say, rather than using my array of strings, my array of numbers, my arrays of this stuff, I can say const post is equal to an array. And if we imagine this array holds all of a Discord messages, right? Some real world modeling for some stuff we just learned. We know that arrays are lists. They can hold more than one value of something. So we say, what if this holds all of a Discord's messages? Well, we can't model a Discord post with the data types we know about before, right? Imagine if this was an array of strings. Everything has to fit between these 2 quotes for a string, right? If I'm going to create a post object, I can't make it a string like hello, because how do I know who the author was? How many emojis it was reacted to? When was it posted? I can't make it a number. I still don't have all that information. I might be able to put the text of a string in, right? I might be able to say like, oh, I said, Dipley's gay. But And I could display that to a page if I was writing an app, but I could display that, but who sent it? It needs a bunch of metadata about it, right? It needs other properties is what we call them. So we use objects. So I can say here, comment this down. We imagine this post represents a Discord message. Actually, let's call this message instead of post, right? That makes a little bit, it's not a post. So we can have this post represents a Discord message. This array holds all of a Discord's messages. Those are the two things we're going to be working with for probably the next 2 days of our exercise, is that concept. An array of messages and a message itself. And I could say, what does a message look like? We need to use an object. This is the last basic type you're going to learn in JavaScript, pretty much. We know strings, numbers, booleans, which we haven't used a ton, we'll get into. We have arrays. We have functions. Now we have objects. This is the last basic thing, and then the next thing is going to be combining all of this stuff. So what does an object look like? An object has the syntax of curly brace openings. Opening, and then it looks like a list of variables. It's basically a way, an object is a way to store multiple properties in one place. What if I want an object to have something like this? Const my message to Dipley is equal to an object. And I say, okay, so we can say it's from Horsey. What channel is it in? Peach. I don't know what the fuck it's called right now. Neil changes it every 5 minutes. It's in the main channel. Kex. I got 5 kex. This is what an object looks like. It looks like you open it like a function with the curly brace. We use that there. And we declare it like a variable because it is. So we use const still. And we give it a name. My message to Dipley. So we're still just declaring a variable. It's just of type object. And then each property has its own type, right? From is a string, as we can see here. Channel is also a string. It's the name of a channel. The kex is 5. Let's add the text. Hey, Dipley. Did you see this funny thing? And that's the message. And with that information, Discord could, if I put that in my array, right? The variable, just like we've done before, put it in my array here. Discord could write a for loop using the messages, looping over the messages, just like we looped over stuff, and it could display the message.text. I'll go over this more now. This is, this is literally, quite literally how Discord works. They have a bunch of objects like this that represent messages. They have an array of all the messages. Say you go into Discord and you click the channel. You go here and you click, go here and click number 2, love, good Lord. You click that. They don't have the messages loaded already because they'd have to load every channel's messages ever right away, right? They say, okay, then go to the back end and get me an array of objects that represent all the messages, and then now display them on the page in a loop. So this functionality, as simple as it looks, is, you add some infrastructure and some scaling and some crap like this to it, and that's Discord. That's at the root. Hope that makes a little bit more sense, maybe seeing a real world example than maybe some of the more abstract stuff we've done. But
big time.
Good. Glad to hear. We're gonna be we need to know the basics, but we will get into doing all real world stuff and all representations of stuff soon. And combining these things. And another way, if we want to do this exact same thing again, and then I'll go through the for loop and the thing, I can say, you're at the World of Warcraft login screen. I ran through this example with Neil the other day. if I can say new example of the exact same thing. I want to log in to World of Warcraft. I open the app and I see my list of characters. So I can say const characters is equal to an array, right? Maybe I've got my mage, my warlock. So they're going to loop over my characters, right? I is less than characters dot length, I plus plus, and the console.log. They would show it with HTML, but for our purposes, obviously, we console.log. I can say characters I can log it. And if you run this, you'll see my mage, my warlock. That's how the World of Warcraft login screen runs, right? They have to get the data from somewhere and display it. But again, all you can display here, if you have an array of strings, is the term my mage, my warlock. That is completely useless. Like, you can't do anything with this. Strings are great for being properties on stuff, like up here, who it's from, the channel, the text. But strings themselves do not have enough like data availability to show me anything. I need information. So what if we change this? What if we change that array of strings, since it doesn't have enough dynamic ability to represent a World of Warcraft character to an object. Now let's say const my mage. Let's use a variable for this and store it in an object. And let's say, okay, what level is he? He's 60. What's his name? I think, Crane Juicer is what Kelly's called right now, or something like this. What else they got? Fucking Realm. What realm is it on? It's on Tichondrius. And with an object, my characters is equal to an array of characters, array of objects. Now, when I loop over it, not my mage.length, my characters.length. Now, when I loop over it and I say for let I equals 0, start at 0, I is less than my characters.length, the length of my array, and then increment every loop, we can console.log my characters. Actually, maybe probably easier to be like const character is equal to my characters I. Now character. Now the variable character named character is equal to the entire object at that index. My characters. So now we have, for instance, we have this whole object. Character is my mage in the loop. So I can say console.log. My mage is, not my mage because we're in the loop. This character is level. Character.level. Using this dot notation, that's how we access a property of an object, which you'll get quite familiar with. Even so, if I use VS Code, right, I say const character is equal to my characters I, that index. I can hover over this now because we're using objects and JavaScript can help us. I hover over my characters, and if you see, it says const my characters with a colon, and then the type. It's an object with a level, which is a number, a name, which is a string, and a realm, which is a string. And if I hover over character, you see that it's that as well, without the array at the end. You see at the very bottom of that, it's got the little array notation telling me it's an array of these objects. Const character is a individual one of those objects. Now we're using data types that we can actually do something with. We have enough. This is the basis of all programming, really. Discord works this way. The World of Warcraft login screen works this way. Almost any app you can think of. An NFT displaying app works this way. NFTs are an object, right? I can say const my NFTs is equal to this. Here I can say const NFT is an object, right? And it's got the image URL. It's, dayjob.com/fucking whatever. It's the title. It's got a title. NG my pandas. It's got the number. What number is my NFT? Oh, this is like panda number, like 38718. And then it's got a bunch of other shit. And I can use this. And I can add that NFT to my array. And now I can loop through and display them on the page. This is quite literally what I did to display the pandas on the website when you log in. You log in with your wallet. I get your address and I look them up via this one API and I get back an array of objects that look like this. And then I can just use those objects to display them to the page. Like this is actually how all this stuff works. Using objects and using arrays of objects are some of the most fundamental things in programming. You'll never stop using them and they're used absolutely anywhere. You guys can probably imagine yourself what else is an object, because anything can be a property. You just have to give it a name and what is the value of that property. So you can imagine almost anything is like this. Your friend list on Facebook is an array of friend objects, right? Your friend has when you guys met, your chat history, it's got all this kind of shit in there, and those are just different properties. We'll be going into those a little bit more in depth later, where you can actually, an object can be a property on another object and such, because anything can nest. But I think this is probably enough now to get you guys sort of started with, using these and reiterating stuff from yesterday, just kind of getting used to declaring variables and syntax and typing and stuff. So the homework is going to be about 5 to 10 different small things that are basically the same thing, very repetitive. You're not going to change necessarily the homework. This one isn't harder than the other, but the homework is going to be something like create an object that represents X from a game, add these properties, add it to an array, display those on the page. And, one of them can be you thinking of it yourself. But we kind of want to get used to this, this idea of typing more code. So I've just done the same thing 3 times here. I hope everyone can see that much. My message to Dipley is an object with these properties. It's from Horsey in the channel main, kex5, text this. I create an array of those messages, and then I can loop through them and display properties on them. I can say stuff like this. I can say message from, message.from says message.text with and has kek amount of message.kex. And you can see that when I type, my autocomplete here knows what type of object I'm dealing with. So when I type dot for this object notation, if I type K, I'm getting kex as an option. It knows, it's smart. It says, yeah, kek is an object. Oops, I forgot to do this. We need to set what the message is. So we can access these properties and do whatever we want with them. And then I did the same thing with this. Here's an example of the same thing, but it's weak, right? Const my characters is my mage and my warlock. And you can loop through it. You can log the value, but the value is just going to be a string, right? Does it make sense to everyone? Sort of like, I know it's hard to ask a question to a group at a time, but does it kind of make sense of everyone why you would need objects versus these other, what we call primitive types? Like you can't do anything with this string. You can't associate an amount of a level with this string when you're using it. You can't say this my mage is a string of level 60, because where would you put it? This is the whole value. We need an object to be able to say its name is my mage and the level is 60. So this is a better representation of it, an object that has attributes. And in this same way, the object can be used and modified. So we can reuse it for the entire time you live. If we go underneath where we log out my characters, let's say my mage just leveled up. Let's write a function to level something up. level up character. And again, this is real world. This is exactly how this stuff works. And it takes a character. We have a character object here with properties level, name, and realm as described above. Its level is already set on the object, but we need to increase it by 1. The character leveled up. So what if we say character.level is equal to character.level plus 1? Right? Add 1 and set the level. Now the level will be 61. It leveled up. We don't need to create new variables because we can modify the properties on this object. And they can persist. So I'm going to write some homework. I'm going to kind of keep this one, in 20, 25 minutes. I know there's a lot here, but the homework is going to get you writing this, it's going to be 2 days away. We won't do another one tomorrow. It'll be just like work day if anyone's going to be around doing stuff. But you're just going to write objects, arrays, and loop and display properties and add little functions to change properties on them for the next couple days and get familiar with that. And in that same way, you'll become familiar with the other primitive data types, string, number, like this kind of thing. What if I wanted to use a Boolean? Kind of some people had some issues with what a Boolean is. Let's use an object. Let's use a user object to represent users of our website. Create the array. And let's say const horsey is equal to a user. And I've got username, the horseman, 9,000. And I've got is admin true. Right? That's a good use of a Boolean. To determine whether someone's is admin or not. Can I delete the server? So now let's say const dipley is equal to username. Who knows? He changes it like 400 times a day. And then is admin false. Right? What if I now have a function delete server? And I take a user in here, okay? Take a user to delete the server. Now, if I do not check whether somebody is an admin or not, anyone could delete the server. So I need to say if user.isAdmin, we can delete the server. Here. We don't need to write the code for it. We don't have a server. But if we put it in this block after the if, it will only run if the user is admin is equal to true. And we can even say this here to be explicit. So this is every data type that exists in JavaScript as a basic data type. We have, strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, and objects. And they will comprise anything you'll pretty much ever do in JavaScript at the very least. You guys can follow along after and sort of type this out. I will also paste it into the announcements channel, but the homework will get you writing most of this stuff from scratch as well. So it's really up to you guys how you want to tackle it. And I'm willing to spend like another 10 or 15 minutes here right now if anyone has any specific questions on stuff.
I've got something. So an array is sort of more like a collection of all of the same type of
So it's
So like it's all numbers. You can't be numbers and strings, but an object you can have a mix of different types.
very good question. You can mix types in an array in JavaScript. You can do that. I can have this. Const my array of different shit is equal to 42, hello, false. I can do that. Most languages don't let you do this because you can shoot yourself in the foot, right? What if I loop over this array and I'm expecting something to be a string and it's 43? So you can do that, but I never encourage it. All of my arrays are usually of the same type. You are correct that objects can have different properties of different types, and that's often encouraged as well. It doesn't matter because as long as level is always a number, you could write code that uses the level property. Does that make sense? Like you wouldn't want to have a class like this or an object like this, my warlock, and say level, and this one's a string. Because this one's a number, this one's a string. You want to treat them the same when you do that, right? So you try and keep the property types the same. Level is always a number. Level is 60. But you can change the types between properties. So level can be 60, but doesn't mean name has to be a string. Name can be, or sorry, doesn't mean name has to be a number. Name can be a string. Does that make sense? Anyone got anything?
What's your thoughts on making a evolving resource like a glossary, like as we learn things like you're talking about strings and objects and that, like maybe write down object on a new file, write down like object, then this is how you make it, and then comment out or something like that, like this is what this does.
Sure.
I know we could go look that stuff up, but
yeah, sure. I think one of you guys should take the initiative and start it, and then you guys should maintain it as well. A shared glossary.
yeah, I just don't know. I feel like I'd be missing something. You know what I mean?
No, I'll look it over, but it's better to get you guys typing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love the idea of a shared glossary, even if it's a file that looks like this, like const my string is equal to hello, and then you say like at the top of big comments, this is glossary. This is how you declare a string variable. A string is a piece of text within two quotes, like that kind of thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then like knowing what, my string is there, which would be what? An object, right?
Nope. That's a
hello is a string.
Yeah, exactly. This would be an object because it has the braces here and then a bunch of properties in here.
That's another thing I'm trying to like wrap my head around is like the different types of brackets. There's 3 as far as I can tell so far, right? That's it. And then which each one does of the 3.
That's going to come with typing them more and more and more and more and more. That's why the exercises are going to be, I'm going to give you like 5 to 10 exercises of like doing the same thing. Like,
do they always do the same thing? Like, so there's 3 different sets, right? So do they all do
yes. So
one thing each?
So these brackets are for function calls or declarations. They're only used in functions. So like this. And then when I call my function, this. You'll remember them from console.log as well. Log is a function, so it uses those brackets. These brackets are only used for arrays. They're used when accessing the array as well. So I go like, you notice this when we accessed it with I in the loop, right? If I get the 0th element, I use those brackets again because I'm accessing an array. See how they're paired? When I declare a function, I use these brackets. When I call a function, I use the same brackets. When I declare an array, I use the square brackets. When I access an element of the array, I use the same brackets.
So you set it the same way you call it.
Yep, exactly. They're paired. It'd be very confusing otherwise. There would be no pattern.
Yeah.
So the curly brackets have multiple uses. They're the only confusing ones. The rule of thumb is basically it'll change every language, but in JavaScript, the curly brackets are used when the other ones aren't used. Are you declaring a function? Or are you calling a function and passing in the arguments? Or using an array? Or calling getting element out of an array? If not doing those things, you're probably using curly brackets.
Is it like rules for like what they do, or is it just kind of?
Yeah, they enclose. It's actually quite complicated to explain without like overwhelming people, which is why I kind of don't gloss over it at the beginning. But it involves something called scoping. So when I go back to like day 2, right? And I say this, I have this print string function that's really simple. Function print string, takes a string, prints a string. These curly brackets, you see how I click it and this one's highlighted down here? This means everything between those two curly brackets, the opening and the closing, is scoped within it. Otherwise, this function that I name it, print string, it doesn't know what to do when I call it. Well, when I call this function, I want you to run everything between the two brackets, which is to say everything that is scoped between the two brackets. After this closing bracket, none of this stuff is in the function here, right? Like none of it is in the function print string I made. Like none of this stuff, right? I closed
Kind of like boxing it out from the rest of it.
Yep, that's exactly what scope is. Yes, it blocks it out. And it's the same with the object. So when I go declare the object, I open one with the curly brace. Then I give it a list of properties, which you'll get used to writing. And then I close it with the curly brace. And it says everything in between these two curly braces is part of my object. Everything before and after it is not. It's all scoped. It's blocked out from the rest. It gives you a way to contain information and just say everything between here is my object. It's the same thing with the array syntax. This const messages is equal to an array of my message to Dipley, right? With these square brackets. We know this is an array. Everything between the two square brackets is in the array. Everything from the opening bracket to the end of the bracket. After that, nothing else is in this array. Same with this for loop. I write the for loop, and at the end, I open a curly bracket. I want my loop to get a message, and then I want to write this big console.log. After that, I want to close my bracket because my for loop is done. I don't want anything else to happen in my for loop. I want it scoped only to those two lines. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, it definitely makes a lot more sense.
Okay, dope.
And then one of the other big things I kept noticing where I was getting hung up on is I noticed that like some codes, I know you can have variations in codes, but like some things I don't understand is like the spacing. The spacing always matter.
So
7.
In JavaScript, spacing does not matter. In languages like Python, it does. It uses indentation to determine when to run stuff. And it makes it very readable because you can look at something and look at the spacing and be like, I know this runs there, yada, yada, yada. JavaScript doesn't care. I can have my object be this. That. But isn't that like shitty to read? It's easier to see it all like that. My list of my properties. So they usually say on a new line indent. And for spacing, you also want to pair stuff so it's readable. My for loop here has that open curly brace we talked about. and then a closing curly brace. But if I did this and put the closing curly brace on the same line as the character.level call, like, I hope you guys would agree, this looks like shit. I don't know where the for loop ends. If I look down to the end of it, it looks like it just continues forever. If I have the curly brace matching up with the word for, I can say, wow, from line 43 over here to 46 is my for loop, because I see the word for, which has the curly brace on it, right? Opens up, and then I see the ending curly brace. So a lot of that stuff is just for us, so that we can read this stuff better when we get used to it. Like, this is also a valid object. And I think that looks like shit. It's got everything on one line. There's commas in there. There's colons, strings, numbers, properties, and the curly braces all in one line. I could imagine if you had an object with 100 properties in it, it would be nonsense. Whereas otherwise, it's top to bottom the same way. It's the same with writing code in a function. I have level up character. Character level is equal to character level dot plus 1. And I have it spaced in. I use a tab. I just hit enter and hit tab. That's what I do on each line. Because if I did this and everything's the same line, this looks like this. My brain, most people's brains don't process. It looks more like it looks like a Dipley summary. Like, my brain doesn't process it. But you can do it like this, and you can see, okay, function level up character, and then the thing indented. Here's the scoped stuff in the function. Here's all my stuff. Oh, and then a curly brace that matches up with the indentation of the line function, and I know my function's over. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. So even like after, like below there on line 55, you could put like NFT with no space equals, and it'd be fine too, right?
Yep. I have to do one.
But you can't do that.
I have to do one between const, because const is a keyword. But this other stuff, I can do this for sure.
Right. Okay. That helps. Yeah, it definitely helps clear that up.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to.
And I think you'd agree.
Put everything in my head.
Like, this also looks like shit, don't you think?
Yeah, it's ugly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally. It looks like you named a variable const equals, like, yeah, it looks like you named the variable NFT equals open bracket.
Yeah, sad face.
Yeah, exactly. So those are just standard stuff that most people have agreed upon after like 80 years of programming, where they're like, listen, all code should look the same so that you don't get alarmed by writing it. I kind of told some other people this as well, but for the naming of the variables as well, you can see I do lowercase. And if there's two words, I start capitalizing letters up to the second word. This is called camel case.
Yep.
Some people do this. Either one is valid. This is snake case. Underscores between words. My list of characters. I would advise you to pick one you like that looks more readable to you. It does not matter which one you pick, but I would recommend not to mix them, because it makes your code look messy. I also don't recommend just doing this. I've seen some people writing code here the past couple of days that are doing this. Like, it looks like a word, my characters. And especially as you get on to like longer names, like my character, my list of characters. Kind of bleeds together. It's hard for me to decipher, at least. I go for camel case. I don't know why. My brain likes it. If you like snake case with the underscores between stuff, it's totally up to you. It's a personal preference, whatever works for your brain. And you can do it for functions as well, right? You're naming functions. I use camel case for everything, but you can do. Some people really like this. I know I've taught some people to program before in the past who decided they like this better and it's more readable for them. And then so go ahead.
Are those underscores invalid in any language? Like
No.
Invalid character?
No, not invalid in naming. No, but like every language has its own sort of like unofficial style guide. Like in Python and C++, you always use underscores. I don't know why. I've never bothered to look it up. But if you ever read Python code, you'll see snake case. If you see JavaScript code, 99% of the time you will see camel case. I don't really understand why one is taken over and only in a subsection of a language, but you can do whatever you want. There are certain characters you can't use. Like I can't use reserved characters. Like this means greater than, right, in programming. So I can't use it. I can't use plus either. You can only use letters and numbers and some symbols. But to keep it simple, I've used camel case since basically the day I started, and I don't really know why. But please feel free to use snake case if it works for you. Anyone else want to ask anything?
I'm trying to get the AI to write a glossary for us.
What a legend. Tell it to explain the primitive types in JavaScript with examples. And I'm sure it would do it.
Order, huh?
Yeah, we should have a competition in the next 10 minutes, whoever can get the best glossary from the AI.
Explain the primitive types of what? Of JavaScript?
Yeah. The primitive data types of JavaScript with comments in the code explaining them. Or something like this. But yeah, does anyone have anything else, or should I unleash the recording and then write some homework? Cool. Okay.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Dope. Love to hear it. So I'm going to hit stop.